Good afternoon. I'm John Shaw, the director of the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute. We'd like to welcome you to another installment of our series, Understanding Our New World. We're really fortunate today to be joined by Admiral Michelle Howard. Admiral Howard is a legend. She has done about everything that you can do in a military career. She was one of the first women to attend the Naval Academy in Annapolis. She's been the highest ranking woman in the history of the Navy, the highest ranking African American in the history of the Navy. She was the first African American woman to command a Navy ship. She has served as Vice Chief of Naval Operations, which is the second ranking position in the Navy, sort of the Chief Operating Officer. And she rose through the ranks steadily. In 2007, she became a Rear Admiral lower half, getting her first star. 2010, Rear Admiral, getting her second star. In 2012, became Vice Admiral, her third star. In 2014, got her fourth star. She had a wonderful 35-year-plus career in the Navy, retired at the end of 2017, and has taught cybersecurity and sits on the board of IBM and joins us from her home in Colorado. So, Admiral Howard, thank you so much for being with us.
John, thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. Legend. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I'm raising the bar here, Admiral, so you're going to don't mean to put pressure on you. So,
all right.
Well, as I read about your career, I mean, the one thing, I mean, so many twists and turns and interesting developments, but let's start sort of at the beginning. You're 12 years old. You're watching a documentary about service academies, and it really kind of brings you in. Tell that story.
Oh my gosh, yes. I was so excited. I got wrapped up, and it was probably the Air Force Academy, and I was so enthralled with the idea of being part of a team and leadership opportunity. I didn't even notice it was all guys. And I went to my older brother, who, at that time was still one of my good friends, and I asked him, I want to go, what do you think? And he's like, hey, you can't go, they're closed to girls. And it's like the worst, tree sign ever. No girls, what? So I go to my mom, and she's like, honey, your brother's telling you the truth. The service academies are closed to women by law. And I was in shock. And my mother, God bless her, was like, it's okay, you're 12. And you may change your mind. But she said, if you don't, when you're old enough, you should apply. And then if you're rejected because you're a woman, we'll sue the government. Best advice ever from a parent. So luckily for me, the law changed in 76. So I applied in 77 and was accepted and started in 78.
And as I understand it, you applied to both Annapolis and also the Merchant Marine. Did you have a particular fascination with water, or how are those two selected?
So I had Air Force on my list. I went to the library and looked at, there were these publications that the service academies put out, but they also talked about what you could do once you were in the military. So when I was 16, I'm looking at the Navy. Women could fly. They could work as communicators, and you could go into the Marine Corps from Annapolis. And anything you could do in the Marine Corps, anything you could do in the Army, you could do in the Marine Corps. So I just thought by applying to Annapolis, I would have the most options by the time I graduated. Merchant Marine Academy, the civilian merchant fleet was completely open to women in terms of what they could do. They could serve at sea. And at the time I was applying to Annapolis, women still weren't allowed to serve on ships, except hospital ships. So I actually applied based on what I thought I might want to do after I graduated.
Okay. Well, we want to get to Annapolis, but I saw one interview in which you mentioned that Star Trek played
Uhura.
Yeah, tell that story, Admiral.
Oh no, I just when we were kids and Star Trek came out in the 60s, it was one of the few shows my mother would let us stay up late to watch. And she just liked the fact, well, she liked science fiction, but she liked the fact it was all these different people in a crew. And if you want to, we forget how bold and unique that whole storyline was, because I remind people there was a Russian in that crew. I can't even imagine us having a Russian in a crew today. So let alone aliens. So Uhura was just phenomenal to me as a little girl. You know, she was clearly, even as the communicator, had an equal role in the equal contribution to the crew, and compared to the very few other television shows that had lead Black actors or actress, she was doing something that was different. She wasn't a nurse, she wasn't a maid, and I just fell in love with her. And she was prescient. I'm telling you, to today, Uhura had Bluetooth before Bluetooth was invented. So she was my gal, and I just found her inspirational.
And did I hear you tell the story that Martin Luther King once had a conversation with her? Maybe she was thinking about leaving the cast, and he said, you need to understand how important you are.
Yes, it's in a couple of books, I think, her bio, and then it turns out, I guess, the Kings were Trekkies. That's good. And they literally, I guess after the first year, she was thinking about going back to live theater, and she literally runs into him at some type of reception, and she just lets him know that she's thinking of leaving the show. And he made it pretty clear that the character Uhura, as an equal member of the crew, was very important in terms of projecting that type of teamwork, but that type that, you know, Black people are confident and can be integrated members of the crew. And so it's related that conversation, that this idea that she was a role model, not just an actress at that point, convinced her to stay with the show.
Wow. So you enter Annapolis, the class of 78, or you entered the fall of 78, and there was just a relative handful of women. You were only the third class. Tell us about your Annapolis years, both the academic piece and then also the kind of broader experience of being at the Naval Academy.
So you have to put what the country was like in context. So, you know, 78, there's still no women on the Supreme Court, right? Sally Ride's not had her first space ride. And so just a few years before, 72, women were marching in the streets for equality, burning their bras. And as a little girl, I was like, what the heck is that about? And then, you know, women were just moving into firefighting and police force. And you think about 72, 73, 74, that's when a lot of the equal rights laws came out, where you couldn't be discriminated because you're female, you couldn't be discriminated against because you're pregnant, you couldn't be discriminated against because you're too old, age 42, and you couldn't be discriminated against because of color or creed or religion. And so the country saw a lot of change in the occupations and employment as women were able to, with these laws coming into place, move into areas that had been traditionally no women allowed. And so Annapolis and West Point and the Air Force Academy are on the cusp of this change. And here's what happens. Change hurts people's minds like new shoes hurt their feet. There is just very bad reactions and unfortunately sometimes bad behavior as well. So when the group of us, the different ones of us started in Annapolis, even with as the third year group, it was an all male class, was my senior class, our training class. They were still, for the most part, frustrated and angry that we were there. They felt we were taking a place for a guy. And in some ways, I can't disagree with their perspective, because at that point, women could fly support craft, but we couldn't even serve at sea. And so we were going into a Navy where what we could do was constrained, and that was true of all of the services. What I could disagree with was how they reacted. And so angry men in a room, they reacted in ways that are not acceptable. What I found is, for those of us like, I had 3 roommates, and we refer to each other as roommates for life. We're still in communication. And then the women in my class, we really bonded. And the year after we graduated, we have an annual brunch, or and one on each coast, normally around homecoming, where just the women get together and talk about how life has been. And then, for most of it, a good portion were still in the service. And then after 15, 20 years, people left the service, and there were just a few of us left. But we really have stayed committed to helping each other and communicating. And I think that environment forced us to be close. And that has been a lifelong blessing as far as I'm concerned.
And you had a kind of an informal pact that if it ever felt like any of you was going to head home, that you would have that you would confer with the rest of the group and just really do a reality check? Or
with my roommates, with the 4 of us, we started with 5, and we lost one plebe summer. She resigned, and we were all being tormented, is the best way to put it. And I'll be honest, I mean, your first year at a service academy, whether it's government or a private one, tormenting of the freshmen is sort of the tradition, is probably the best way to put it. I would say some folks, in that case, women, we were overly targeted, and with the intent to try and run us out of the school. And so when we lost our first roommate, the 4 of us sat down and talked, and we made a pact that in the future, if any one of us wanted to quit, we had to talk to the other 3 first and convince them that we were quitting for our own reasons, not because we were being pressured to leave. And we figured through those conversations, we would have enough strength to convince that person, if it was outside pressure that was causing them to leave, we'd have enough strength to hang together. And we did. The 4 of us graduated.
Now, you were a math major, as I understand, and then also did some theater. Talk about those 2 aspects of your personality.
Oh, so yeah, I liked math from when I was a kid. And at the time I went to Naples, 80% of the midshipmen had to be enrolled in technical courses. So I went for the area I enjoyed. The Masqueraders was the theater group, was an opportunity to be with other midshipmen in an environment outside of the, marching and studying. And I really enjoyed the camaraderie. In retrospect, I think I would have been happier having been a stage manager. And in deep retrospect, I would have been happiest of all if I'd been the director. But the English professors were the directors. So yeah, I think in another life, I would have wanted to grow up to be Steven Spielberg.
Well, Admiral, let's talk a little bit about the Navy. And the one way to maybe start out is, what should Americans know about the Navy that they probably don't?
So there is the service that goes back to the foundings of this country. And our founding fathers in the Federalist Papers talk about the need to have a Navy, that there's reasons for having a Navy. One, you have to be able to protect national interest or commercial interest overseas. And I think it's John Quincy Adams who, this is a paraphrase, talks about capricious tyrants. And he's right. No matter what era you live in, there's capricious tyrants. and that they will go after U.S. citizens or U.S. property, and you have to have a Navy that can protect all of that overseas. And so that has been the role of navies since navies existed. And then next, for us, there's the protection of national interest, and then defense. And navies are wonderful. You're mobile. You can defend from international seas, have an impact, and all of this protection is away from your homeland. And to me, that's the one piece. The Navy does the away game, and that, if you want to protect your homeland, you want to do it as far away from your homeland as you can, and shape the world away from your homeland. You don't want conflict to come to your home if you can help it. And so that is also, I think, one of the gems of having a Navy if you're a maritime nation.
Does the Navy have a culture that is distinctly different from, say, the Marines, Air Force, Army? I mean, obviously generalizations are fun, they're not always precise, but how do you see the culture of the Navy?
I will tell you some of the things when I've been in the joint environment, when you're serving with folks from the other services. The one thing I've gotten as feedback is that the naval officers tend to be flexible, tend to be good strategic thinkers. And I don't know if that's because we're deployed and are in the international arena. I mean, I remember as a lieutenant commander doing a West African training cruise where, as a lieutenant commander, you're going to pay a visit on the head of state, and you're communicating talking points given to you by not just the fleet commander, but literally State Department. And so you end up in these environments where you've got to think beyond just your shipboard level. You've got to think. So I've been told we're flexible, good strategic thinkers. Been told by the Army we're terrible tacticians and we don't follow our own doctrine. And then, I think having a service where command is absolute, whether it's command of a submarine, a ship, or aircraft carrier. I've been told that sort of filters through the naval officer as well, that this sort of used to being in control, being autonomous, and no feedback please on that last decision is also part of sort of our culture.
Oh, great. But now, as I looked at the various jobs you've had, I mean, you had some DC jobs, but you are also deployed quite often. And some of them were, the positions included engine officer, chief engineer, executive officer, commanding officer. For example, what does a chief engineer do?
So you're responsible for the propulsion plant and all the auxiliary systems. And it's everything from the maintenance to the long-term overhauls to the operation of that equipment. So when I was chief engineer, I was on an ammunition ship. I had about 100 people. And then that was also Desert Storm. So you're literally underway and running the ship for months at a time in a high heat environment. And it's a 26-year-old propulsion plant. And you've got to keep the ship moving through the water and figure out how to isolate and fix things as they just break from age or heat. And just, a ship that's dead in the water is literally just a great target. And so you're responsible for everything from people having hot water for their showers in the morning to making sure there's enough fuel on board to making sure the plant is just singing to the electrical systems on board. You're generating power so that all the combat systems, everything runs on the ship off electricity. That's all part of, and then that's your primary job. At that level, you're also a tactical action officer. And in the Gulf War, we were taking turns standing watch, and you're managing the combat weapon systems on board the ship and making sure they're in the right posture, and then waiting, looking and being alert for potential threats, and then taking the first immediate responses if a threat pops up.
Well, and as I looked at your career, I mean, just the range of tasks you were involved in. I mean, you had mentioned Desert Shield and Desert Storm, involved in tsunami relief in Indonesia, dealt with refugees. We'll talk about fighting pirates in a few minutes, but just the range of activity that a naval officer is involved in would, I think, surprise a lot of Americans. So,
and maybe that's why the words I've heard "flexible" are appropriate. So you have a career in the Navy, you will never be bored, because the odds of you having the same mission twice are pretty. Hang on, sorry about that. The odds of you having the same mission twice are not good, which is great. And so literally everything from maritime security ops all the way to humanitarian situations. And I've had friends who've done evacuations of people from countries to high-end combat. It's all a possibility. When we train ships to go to sea on deployment, we have to train a wide range of missions based on the possibility that any one of them could happen and end up on that captain and crew's plate or that task force's plate.
I saw in one interview you said, and I forget what word you used, but you said maybe the most interesting or fulfilling part or moment in your career was commanding your own ship. I mean, what is that like? I mean, is it just 24/7 intensity where you just literally are on edge from the moment you start to when you end?
I wouldn't say on edge. I mean, there's obviously certain missions where that there's periods where there's more intensity. You are on duty 24/7. So you're on call. You're from the time you take command to the day you're relieved. You're responsible for that ship and that crew and for getting the mission done. And so things are going to happen. And the ship is always operational. And so every minute of the day, somebody could call you and they either need you to come to the bridge or you're at home and something's happened on the ship and they want to report to you and then get your guidance on what to do next.
Well, I'm sure you've told this story a zillion times, but the story of Captain Phillips, and particularly in the context of the way that you assembled a diverse crew to tackle the challenge you faced. I mean, you selected a crew, kind of an emergency response crew that...
A couple of them.
Okay, well, we'll tell the story. Take as much time as you want.
So the counter-piracy task force was stood up about 3 weeks before I took command from Rear Admiral McKnight. And the idea was to have defense of all the shipping, and mostly defense of commercial assets out there, and trying to create these zones where it was safe for ships to transverse the Gulf of Aden and the Somali Basin and then, deter pirates. And so 3 weeks into this, I take over. And then a couple of days into taking command of the counter-piracy task force, Captain Phillips and the Maersk were kidnapped by pirates. And I had not really gotten a chance to know my staff or the ship, the CO, the crew, and the Marines. I was on a big deck amphib, the Boxer, and we realized very quickly that the pirates were trying to get Captain Phillips ashore. They'd taken him off the Maersk, they put him in a life raft, And we got a hold of Maersk, and they gave us the life raft specifications. And so it's motoring along at 3 to 4 knots. The life rafts can only handle about 100 people. So they've got food and water and fuel for days, right? And it's covered. And so one of our challenges was we had to stop the life raft from getting ashore, and we had to do it in a way that didn't pressurize the pirates. We were worried that if we were coercive, they would probably just harm Captain Phillips, and in the worst case, kill him. And so the mission had to be about successfully rescuing Captain Phillips. And, you know, in the end, the special forces come, but they're not there with you at the start of the crisis. They are superhuman, but they actually have to use aircraft to get to where you are. And it's a big world. So I put together 2 planning teams and looked at trying to get diverse perspectives on the planning teams. I put my lawyer on there. I put the ship's meteorologist on there. She happened to be a woman. And because this was about currents and the movement of the life raft, there was a retired FBI agent on board, and he was there to advise the Marines who were eventually going to go into Kuwait, into Iraq, because this was still during the Iraq War. And he was there to help them with law enforcement training for site exploitation, how to properly do chain of custody. He was not a hostage negotiation specialist, but I thought a guy with law enforcement background could be helpful in coming up with ideas. And then I grabbed a couple of Marines because I wanted some aggressive idea making. And you know, and anybody I asked, the captain of the ship, the MUC, everybody, I said, here's the people, like, they were like, yes, yes, yes. You know, and people wanted to be on the 2 planning teams. And then I got them together and said, look, we've got to stop the life raft from getting ashore. We've got to do it in a way where the pirates know we're not going to hurt them. And we got to have a plan quickly, because we had a destroyer trailing the life raft, and we had another frigate a few miles away. And I said, so, you know, come up with ideas, 45 minutes. And then left. And then they kludged the 2 planning teams, but they came up with a great idea. We're going to use water to stop the life raft from getting ashore. And so their idea was the destroyer would back away, come into a high-speed turn, and use water just to push the life raft, sort of like a ski turn. And if it's water, then the pirates, you're not shooting at them. They know you're not trying to hurt them. And so floated the idea up, and the people above me were like, do it. Because, you know, they're like us. We got to do something. And this, it's crazy, but it sounds the most reasonable, non-kinetic way to get the life raft to stop. And so we walked the destroyer CO and his team through the plan, and then they figured it out. And that's that. As soon as it went dark that day, they set up and did this big ski maneuver. Luckily for us, I guess that it was hot. They kept the life raft door open, so I guess some of the water went inside, and the pirates stopped motoring, and they were like, they started to yell out, what's going on? What's happening? But they stopped. And then we waited, and we waited several hours, and then they started up again. So pass number 2. And then we had another ship come in and just use fire hoses. And they just said, okay, we're ready to talk now. And they didn't hurt Captain Phillips. And so then that allowed us to start having an actual hostage negotiation conversation with them. And it also, we were able to pass them some food that gave them some trust in us. And then they gave us a line so that we could actually tow them to safety. We just didn't let them know we were towing them back out to sea. We weren't towing them into Somalia. But all's fair in those types of situations. But that planning team, having all those diverse perspectives on those teams, John Stuart Mills, you know, you've got to have different ideas And then when they rub against each other, the best one or the truth rubs out. And I very proud of what the team came up with, and just obviously ecstatic that it worked, that we were able to stop the life raft from getting into Somalia.
Well, tell us about your meeting with Captain Phillips, and then of course you must have met Tom Hanks for the movie.
Oh, so yes, so years later when they made the movie, I got invited to the premiere in DC, and so actually, obviously, I met Captain Phillips on board the ship, and then we got him to medical and had a physical, and put him in a room, and I said, we're trying to set it up so you can talk to your wife, and then I said, I don't know if religious, we have some material here for you, Bibles, Quran. And he said, he goes, I don't have my reading glasses. So I said, here, you can have my reading glasses. And he goes, how old are you? And I go, I'm your age, Captain Phillips. I'm the Admiral. I'm the woman in charge. So takes a while to get to this rank. So we got him, opportunity to talk to his wife. Then the president called and talked to him, and then we moved him back to the destroyer so we could get him to Mombasa, so he could get reunited with the Merce crew and his company, and then have even probably more health exams. So then I didn't get to meet him again till the premiere of the movie in DC, and that was great. I got to meet his wife, and it felt like coming to closure. He looked healthy and comfortable. And so, no, I mean, the director, and got to talk with Tom Hanks. My husband, the retired Marine, was excited. There was free popcorn involved. So it was a good day for everybody.
Well, I heard you talking about this moment, and you said something that struck me, which you said, at times of crisis, that is the time that you're calmest. Is that through training or just instinct?
I would say that's probably training, and I mean, there's always, when you get that first piece of information, there's always going to be those milliseconds of, and then it's, it's a matter of, okay, take a deep breath and rationalize the information, and then get focused on what you need to do. And I don't think it's just my own self-assessment. I'm new to the command, and I'm driving the staff and giving orders and making decisions and talking to the COs. And 2 days into this, my OPSO came in and he said, Admiral, he goes, I just want to tell you that it's how level you are and how calm you are. It's really very helpful. And I said, yeah, in a crisis, I'm sure it's very easy to be undisciplined and just allow yourself to scream and shout with the frustration of a mission that you're not sure is going to be successful, but that's not going to help the people around you be better sailors or better Marines and plan better if they've got the additional pressure of someone who's exhorting, but that's not the moment. Right. There are moments to exhort. That's not the moment. That's the moment to give clear guidance, clarity in communications. And they know the pressure, they know the time, and then just give them the box to operate in, and then tell them to come back to you with answers or options, either one.
Great. Well, I saw a talk that you gave in which you were asked about your heroes, and you mentioned, I think 4 or 5, you mentioned your mom, you mentioned Queen Elizabeth I, Harriet Tubman, and Admiral Zumwalt. So walk through those candidates for your Hall of Fame.
No, I just, as a little girl, I was fascinated with Queen Elizabeth I and the whole Spanish Armada. And I mean, this is before I even thought about going in the Navy. I just thought it was great that this woman had the courage and the capability to lead a country. And it was clear to me as a girl that, this was unusual. And then Harriet Tubman, my parents gave us a lot of Black history books to read growing up. And Harriet Tubman was right at the top for me. I mean, that's just bravery personified. Someone who just goes back and risks her life to rescue slaves and get them to freedom again and again and again. And, years later, I joke, a short Black woman with a long rifle. What's not to love about that story? So, resonated with me. My mom, of course, because she's just always had what a great parent. I'm lucky. Just always had the right thing to say to keep us motivated and keep us thinking. And CNO Zumwalt, one of our youngest CNOs, and came in at a time when there was racial inequality in the Navy. It was still pretty much an all-male Navy at that time. But I mean, he came in, and then there's sit-ins on carriers, Black sailors refusing to work. And he realized there was an ingrained belief set and attitude in the wardroom of officers. And he said, we're done. This is not about there's Black sailors or white sailors, there's just sailors. And he's doing this in the early 70s, and he's sort of at the forefront of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And he just made it a paramount part of being the chief. All sailors are going to be treated the same, period. And if you're not happy with that, the Navy's probably not the place for you. And it's his leadership literally drove change in the Navy. And that, to me, that's just remarkable.
I saw you speak via YouTube at a town hall meeting, and a young African-American girl said, so what have you learned? What lessons should I know? And you said 4 things. You said, figure out what your goal is and pursue it aggressively. 2nd, keep a sense of humor. 3, stay connected to people who look like you. And then last, you said, be willing to let some things go.
Yes.
Expand on all of that.
So if you're moving out in a non-traditional sphere, and I mean, this is not necessarily women of color, you could be an entrepreneur in a new space, or you could be a woman scientist. There's Department of Labor talks about gender non-traditional roles. If a community or organization is less than 20% women, it's still probably non-traditional work. And so you just have to be aware of your environment and understand what you're getting into it and commit to it. When I talk about pursuit, this is about, no, I am making myself aware that there's going to be challenges, and I'm committing to it now before I start the journey. Because if you don't have that sort of commitment, you're probably not going to finish the journey. And sense of humor, every leader I've met who's been in something unique and different, they've all had a sense of humor. And so at the end of the day, if you can't laugh at some things or laugh at yourself, it's another burden, I think, that makes it harder to move forward. I've often said you got to have stamina, and then the staying connected. It was less about people who look like you, but people who have the same shared experiences. And so sometimes that is people who look like you. It's staying connected with my roommates. We're all women. But because we all started the journey at the same time, we have the same experience sets and challenges and barriers. And so you have to have a group that you can talk to, and they're not going to be co-located with you. It's not going to be like being able to walk next door and next cubicle and have a cup of coffee. You're going to have to sometimes find those people. And I refer to it as, it's like the quilting bee of the 1800s for women. That getting together once a month and putting quilts was not about quilt making. It's about the conversation, sharing wisdom. How do you do things out here in the frontier? You know, because these women were the family doctors, the family educators, the, you know, helping plant and crop, and had to learn to shoot to defend themselves. So those sessions are about exchange of experiences and being able to ask questions, not about the quilts. And so you have got to create your own sort of quilting bee, whether it's virtual, but that you can sit there and go, I'm not the first person to go through this. The challenge is sometimes in life, the first person to go through it, there's a big gap between that first person and second person. So the communication is lost because of time. But generally, you can find another human being or two or three who are they have shared experience sets. And it may be because they look like you, or maybe because they're doing something special like you are.
A couple of months ago, we had a conversation with a senior diplomat, and I was asking him about how he managed his embassy. And he goes, you know, earlier in my career, I was a naval officer. And he said, one thing I learned is that you can be on a happy ship or an unhappy ship. And he said, life is a lot more fun, and actually it's a lot more productive when you're on a happy ship. What is a happy ship in your experience?
That is a crew who understands, each sailor understands their job and understands the importance of their job. And each sailor is reliable and understands that they've got to be able to do that job to perfection every day without supervision. And they're professional enough to understand they don't have to like each other, they just have to work well together. And that can make happiness and satisfaction. Crews that get missions done successfully, there is a lot of satisfaction and happiness in those crews. And so, like any other major team with a lot of moving parts, the individual members have to learn. Sometimes you got to let the personalities and all that other stuff go and just get focused on the mission of the team. And winning teams tend to be happy. And losing teams suffer disappointment. And the challenge, you know, with us and a ship, the missions, it's not a sport. If you win, you literally save lives a lot of times. If you lose lives. And so the stakes are really high. And so the sailors have to understand that and understand that the sailor who's responsible for making 4 meals a day because you got to rotate people through and only gets 3 hours sleep in 24 is as an important part of the team as the sailor who's standing watch on a console that operates a missile system. That everybody has their place. And when everybody does it exceedingly well, the guy, if the food is perfect, 4 days, 4 meals in 24 hours, sailors are happy. That's if the guy who shoots the missile hits the target, protects the ship, sailors are happy. And so this independence and pursuit of excellence in what they do all contributes to a great crew.
Great. Admiral, we have a few questions that people have emailed in, and it's a wonderful range. Christine from Winnetka, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago, asks, what are the 3 most important qualities an effective leader must possess?
The first quality I think an effective leader has to possess is they have to know themselves. They have to really understand their strengths and weaknesses, because when you get past that first piece, the qualities and what's effective is going to change person to person. And So knowing yourself, knowing your strengths and weaknesses, I have found that leadership at different levels requires different attributes. I found the more senior you get, the better communicator you have to be, because when you're on a ship, you can get everybody on the fantail and talk to everybody and look everybody in the eye. The more senior you get, when you get to 10,000, 11,000, 50,000 people, 300,000 people, that's not possible. And so your ability to communicate across different forum became very important at that level of leadership. Maybe it's not as important at a different level of leadership. And so knowing yourself, knowing your strengths, and knowing the team you're going to lead, then that will bring out those attributes that are most effective for that temporal time, so those set of circumstances. Communication is probably always going to be key. And then literally how you treat people is probably, I think the best advice I ever got, it was from an Admiral, and I was a midshipman. And he said, midshipman, you want to be a success, and you meet admirals and you meet sailors, treat everybody like they're an admiral.
Very interesting. Admiral, we have a question from Mark from Springfield, Illinois, who wants to know, are you concerned about the current state of preparedness of the U.S. Navy and the military overall?
I feel comfortable talking to the Navy, and I feel the Navy is very prepared, very ready, and has always had a very systematic process of how to deploy, be successful at mission. And I found my time as theater commander, we're doing combat mission, and we're not, I mean, it's like nobody in the United States knows. And we're achieving 100% success, no safety issues. And it's completely unknown back in the United States because there's no bad story to tell. My concern is over as time goes on, that you've got these ready forces. It's not the ready forces and the mission, it's when the amount of mission exceeds the amount of forces you have. And then that's when we get into deploying too much, not spending enough time between deployments to do the maintenance to make sure platforms, the physical platforms are ready. That possibility exists, and that's the folks who served have always had to juggle with that. But sometimes that just takes the leaders going, if you want us to do this other piece, here's everything you have us doing now, you need to take something off our plate. And I get that's hard. And there were a couple of times as a 4-star where I got a new set of mission, and I had that conversation with my 4-star big boss and said, hey, here's what's going on. Here's what you've given us to do. Here's all my forces are employed. Something has to come off. Because we literally can't do it all. And, and the big guys, they sometimes, oh yeah, that's right. And I found when I asked and I made my case and I showed the consequences, I got relief. And, hey, sometimes you have to say, for the good of the force and the future capability of the force, we can do this now, but there's other things you still have us doing that maybe aren't as important if you want us to do this thing. And we're still fully occupied. We're out there doing everything you've asked us to do, but now you've given us much more than what's within our capability to do. And so I think for leaders, particularly military leaders, that is the hardest thing, to get the courage to say, I just can't do it all. And have that conversation. And that conversation never failed me. As much as I didn't want to have it, it never failed me. And it was to the benefit. And I think we have that kind of leadership in place now. So I feel comfortable with my Navy.
Okay. Connor from College Park, Maryland, is pondering a career in the armed services, I think Navy in particular, and he's wondering about the tension between excelling and distinguishing himself versus a kind of culture which requires obedience, deference, rigidity. He says, how do you or others serving successfully navigate military rigidity with the need for adaptability?
Yeah, there's a difference between, I think those are different words, right? Discipline versus rigidity. I found my time in the Navy very open in terms of being able to be innovative in mission, being able to think outside the box to get work done. There is standardization of planning processes, standardization of what we wear, standardization of how we communicate. All those contribute to clarity and efficiency of units. If you are not comfortable with an environment that requires that level of standardization and then some sacrifice of what I would call freedom of expression, then that will be a hard environment for mentally, I think, for a person to navigate. But if you understand the sacrifice of some freedom of expression, getting to wear what I want to wear, not this uniform, benefits the overall mission accomplishment, then you're focused on the purpose and what you're doing, not what you're wearing, not what other, not who's in charge. It's what do you want to focus on in life? And so I clearly, the services have a wide variety of personalities, and some that would be considered even more creative and outside the box. In my case, I think of fighter pilots. Some that are, I like the word rigidity. Rigid to me is sort of the submarine community. When you think about going underneath the water and wanting to come back up, that is a lifestyle that requires strict adherence to protocols, just like flying aircraft does. So there's a range of occupations that allow for a range of personalities.
Dawn from Carterville, Illinois, says that her daughter is at the Naval Academy, and so she wants to know what it was like to be one of the first graduates of the Naval Academy as a woman. Also, can you talk about your role as Vice Chief of Naval Operations? And the third part of this, she says, can you tell us one of your favorite sea stories?
So, there was a lot of excitement going on at Annapolis. And then when the ships opened up, I think my third year, we were able to go train on a destroyer. And then that's what convinced me I wanted to go into ships, even though it was only support ships for women. And so it was just exhilarating to graduate and to be able to go to sea. And so I think for all of the women, wherever they ended up, aviation, one of my roommates was a navigator, C-130s, and her first mission was Operation Deep Freeze in the Antarctic. I mean, it was just, what a great time to graduate and go into the Navy and have an opportunity to do things that you were the first women to be able to do. So Vice Chief, Vice Chief is the sort of the yin and yang of life leadership skills. You're not the number one, so you gotta, I call it staying within the baffles of the number one. It's the train, equip, man, so it's huge budgeting responsibility. The Navy had $168 billion a year budget at that point. Acquisitions, personnel training. The Vice Chief's responsible for good order and discipline across the Navy. So it's a fast-paced job, some international engagements underneath treaty negotiations. So it is a 326,000 person, it was a 278 ship and 200,000 civilian Navy that I was trying to manage the day-to-day routine so the chief could be free to lead. So it's, but within that, you can carve out sort of who you are as vice chief and how you want to go about making sure people understand the CNO's policies, the Secretary of the Navy's policies, and are adhering to them, whether they're wear a suit and tie or whether they wear a uniform. And then I will share at this one of my favorite sea stories, because it shows the cusp and the challenges of gender integration. So when I took command of Rushmore, and then we deployed, we embarked the Marines. The combat exclusion law had been repealed, so the Marine units didn't have women in them because the combat exclusion law, when it repealed, did not cover the land forces. And so we bring on board all these Marines, and it's all male units. And the ship, the Rushmore, is integrated. We were about 20% women. And so I would, as the Marines are coming on board and then we're training together, I would walk around and I got to know the individual Marines. And there was this one young man, Lance Corporal Velez from New Jersey. And more New Jersey than Marine in terms of personality. Yo, whatever, Captain. Yo, ma'am. And so every time, you're at sea, you're underway. I probably ran at Lance Corporal Velez a couple of times a week when we were underway, deploy, come back. And he was giving me an earful about, when he first came on board, the Marines were a little bit taken aback that there was a woman CO that's responsible for the ship. And whatever, Lance Corporal Velez, I'm here because I know what I'm doing. And just as you're doing, what you're doing, that's why you're with the Marines. And then literally, we do the 6-month deployment. We're coming back, and we're like 2 days out from San Diego. And Lance Corporal Velez comes to the bridge. Both Marines, ma'am, one of the Marines wants to talk to you. Sure, come on up. And so Lance Corporal Velez comes up and says, Captain, my wife had a baby girl, and I would like a picture of you and me. And Lance Corporal Velez, absolutely. If you would like to have a picture of a woman's, no, let's do it. So we took the picture. And then he's shifting feet to feet, and then he's like, Captain, I want to tell you something. Shoot, Lance Corporal Velez, tell me. And he goes, well, we deployed, Marines weren't sure about you, not sure about you could take care of us, but you got us there, you got us back safe. He goes, so I think it must be that maternal instinct thing. Lance Corporal Velez, you're disinvited from the bridge. Thank you. Folks, escort this Marine off my bridge. Must be that maternal instinct thing. Well, thank you.
They taught you that at Annapolis, huh?
That's right, yeah. Not competency of command, maternal instinct.
Oh, that's funny.
In the end, not by trying to woo him, but just by doing my job, I won over one Lance Corporal, enough that he wanted to have a picture taken with me. And sometimes I think that's, life is a success in changing one person at a time. That's just the way life unfolds.
We have a question from Amy from Chicago who asks, what is it like to sail through an intense storm? And she adds, what does it feel like to be in the middle of the ocean?
So intense storm. So it's interesting, you kind of, your first time, there's anxiety and fear and everything, and you kind of forget that. And so once again, I was CO of Rushmore, and I think we were in the South China Sea, and we had a storm come up. And when you get these weather warnings, because you want to avoid high seas, because you can do damage to the ship. And these were like 15, 18-foot seas. It was 50-knot winds, gusting to 80 knots. And the windbird is just spinning, and I'm on the bridge. There's almost no visibility, and the waves are coming over the bow of the ship. And so, you know, and I've got a helmsman. She's like 18. She's like, Captain, is everything okay? And I go, yeah. And then I start singing, watch out for witches. This is the weather. So she's like, ah. And then I go, look, we're fine. I said, time to get concerned is, you know, because the waves are coming over the bow. I go, time to get concerned is when wave hits over the bridge wing, because the main deck, we're 80 feet above the main deck. I mean, so that would be a huge wave. So I've got the officer, the decks are turning over. I would have said, just stay inside and use your instruments, but they decided to go out onto the bridge wing, maybe because I was on the bridge, trying to have a conversation, and there's gale force winds. And so they're talking on the bridge. One of them's got her back to the bow, and the other's facing her, and then all of a sudden I go, holy cow, there is this rogue wave that is coming up over the bridge wing. And I'm like, Court, and I'm yelling, trying to get their attention, and that wave just broke over the bridge wing and pushed them down the side of the ship. And then, of course, the helmsman's like, ah, because that was my criteria. You can panic when the wave comes over the bridge wing. Okay, we can panic when the wave goes over the mast. So, no, it can be, bad weather can be thrilling, and it can be thrilling for you and your enemy. So generally, you know, you don't see major sea battles in bad weather, because you can't really, Lord Nelson said, you can't control the wind and the seas, and it's hard to control the ship. Open ocean, it's just, it can be eerie. I was off of the equator, off the Atlantic, in the area that's actually called the doldrums, and it is eerie. It is dead still, and you're in the middle of the ocean, and it's just mostly gray clouds right off the water. So it is something out of a bad movie when you're looking around, to just majestically beautiful. I would say the most amazing sunrises and sunsets have been at sea, and then occasionally the Jacques Cousteau moment, you get whales, you get dolphins, and all of that. So it's it can be fantastic in terms of the environment. And then open ocean, the challenge is with the crew in a ship, no matter how big it is, the longer you're at sea and the bigger the ocean, it feels like it shrinks. And you know everybody knows everything about you, everybody knows you know, when you're going to bed, when you're getting up, it just feels, that ocean is so big and the ship is so small. You just feel tight, even in the biggest ship. It's interesting, the dynamics of being in an open ocean at sea for weeks on end, or sometimes months on end.
There's been a number of questions about just the Chinese Navy in particular, or the Chinese Navy, particularly in the South China Sea. We read so much about how assertive they're getting. Has there been a kind of a palpable shift in how the Chinese Navy operates in the last decade or so?
No, they've been very consistent in terms of even if you go back 2 decades, 3 decades, I mean, there have been times where they've shot at running gun battles with the other countries that have claims in the South China Sea. So people have been killed. I would say the last decade, the biggest change was you saw the new movement. We'll just start building islands, right? We'll just build the land and then we'll claim it. So some new tactics, but in terms of their patrolling, building infrastructure on those islands, they have been very consistent. I think sometimes it just, depending on the interaction with the other countries that have claims, and then whether or not it gets to kinetic, it gets more or less in and out of the media attention. But they have been very firm and saying, nope, thousands of miles from the Chinese shore, that is Chinese territorial land. And it's, so some of the other nations have taken them to the International Court through the Law of Sea Convention. And I think it was the Philippines was the last one to take them a couple of years ago. And the courts agreed with the Philippines. Yes, that's clearly part of the Philippines. And then China said, well, we don't agree with the court, so we're just going to ignore it. So that seems to be a pattern with communist leaders. I don't like the international law, so I'm going to ignore it. Okay.
Well, final question, Admiral. I mean, you've had this, as I said, legendary career, and you've by military rules, you retire kind of young. I know you're busy now. You're teaching.
No, I did not.
What's that?
Retire young. Oh my gosh, no. I think people forget. I mean, 35 years. I started Annapolis at age 22, like anybody else. First period of retirement is generally 20. I stayed. And then I made 4-star and retired at 35 years. There definitely have been Air Force generals who've been co-coms who've retired with fewer years. So no, I didn't retire young, no.
Well, no, but in terms of just your age, I mean, it seems like I'm wondering what comes next. I mean, do you have, for example, I could easily picture you running a college or a university, someone who's looking for a kind of a take charge personality. Do you want that kind of management responsibility? How do you see this next phase in your career in terms of teaching, boards, management? How do you want to?
That's pretty interesting. Because the premise to that question is almost 40 years of your adult life in a single career is not sufficient.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, Howard, you're only 60. You only spent 40 years of your life in a single career. What are you doing next, goddammit? Go make something of yourself, young lady.
Well, I know you like to read mysteries and fish, so you're fully entitled to that.
Arkansas River's 7 miles away. So I'm glad I took the teaching. The 2 years to teach at GW gave me a chance to explore an area and that I'm interested in, cyber and policy, cyber and security. And I think because of that, that's when and retiring as an admiral, IBM asked me to join their board, which I told you has been educational and a privilege to serve on that type of tech company board. I speak frequently, and so I still do that. And but other than that, I'm an advisor to a couple of government agencies. U.S. Institute of Peace. I'm on 2 panels for them, and that is actually enough workload for someone who's retired.
That sounds totally fair to me. I just thought that, but obviously you've had this remarkable career and you've made enormous contributions to our country. And thank you for your service. I mean, 35 years of service at that level is something we all have to be grateful for. So thank you for that. And I just want to say too, we'd love when circumstances allow to have you come to the Midwest. I know you're in Colorado, but we can't give you an ocean cruise, but we could probably give you a trip down the Mississippi River from St. Louis. So we'll get a river cruise for you.
Yeah, and right now the speaking has all been virtual. In fact, I'm doing a Los Angeles ROTC consortium in a few weeks, and but yeah, normally it's a treat to get to go to different universities or different organizations and see different parts of the country and meet folks and find out what life is like for them, what life is like for normal human beings, staying in one place, growing up in a community and making a difference in a community by traveling around the world. But I appreciate the offer, and I appreciate the chance to have a chat with you today.
Great, and we will be in touch. So Ambassador, or excuse me, I called you Ambassador. Maybe that's a Freudian slip. Admiral Howard, thank you so much for your time and again for your service. And thanks to all of you for joining us for another edition of Understanding Our New World. This conversation will be on YouTube tomorrow, so please view that and show this to your friends. And thank you for supporting us and helping keep the legacy of Paul Simon alive and well. So thank you so much.